All right, we're done with those graphs for a little bit. We're going to go back to a topic that you probably already heard of, and that is slope. Now, we're going to make it sound a little bit fancier because we're in college now, so we're going to call it this average rate of change. So if you see average rate of change, it is no different than the slope that you used in high school. And this is the common formula that we have for slope. The y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're going to keep using that same formula. No reason to learn a new formula just because this is a different math class than what you had in high school. Now we are going to be really picky about units, and we're going to have you actually talk about what this slope means, interpret the slope. So remember that slope is the y's on top and the x's on bottom. So that means I'm going to have units for y and units for x. So when I write my units out in a minute, I'm going to have to use both the y units and the x units, so 2 units. All right, let's look at our problem. So here's some data about a football player and how many yards he rushed. You don't have to know anything about football in order to get this problem right. I'm going to write this information as an ordered pair. So that's the x comma y in parentheses. The x is always going to be our years or time. X is always going to be our time. So let's see. In 2007, he rushed for 1,341 yards. In 2020, he rushed for 604 yards. So I'm going to use these numbers in my points and plug them into my slope equation. M stands for slope. That's because the French word for slope starts with the letter M. So that's why it ends up with M. So I'm going to plug these numbers in. If you learned y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, that's fine. The order there isn't going to be really important as long as you're consistent. I'm going to type the numerator in. Oops. Then I'm going to type that denominator in. And the directions ask me to round to 1 decimal place. So I am going to go ahead and type this in and round. It also asks me to state the units. So the y units, looking up here, that's 604 yards. So this is yards over. And these x numbers are years. So that's the units, yards per year. And you can write it as that fraction. You can write the word per out, but the yards per year. To get full credit, you have to have the units written out. We are very picky when it comes to units. Now we're going to write an interpreting sentence. There are a couple different ways you can write this. It doesn't have to be my exact thing, but I'm going to point out how you get graded on this so you know what you have to include. So I'm going to say this is about the football player's name was Peterson. So Peterson, since this was a negative answer, I'm going to say he decreased his yards ran per year by 56.7 yards each year. And actually, I'm going to come up to the beginning here and add on average. From, let's see, when did we start? 2007 to 2020. Now that's a whole bunch in a sentence there, but we're looking for some key things. I've got to see this word decreased. If it had been positive, it would be increased, and we're going to do a positive one in just a second. But since it was negative, I'm going to use that word decreased. I'm going to have to see the units, like here, yards per year or each year. We're going to need those. Those are the 2 big key things. Each one of those basically gets you a point. These are usually worth 2 points. They're each going to get you a point. The on average is good to have. The years, that was probably a little bit overkill on my part, but I wanted to definitely make sure and have everything correct. But you've got to have that decreased, or we're going to see an increased one here in a second, and those units in there. So let's look at another one of these problems over here on the next page. And if you need to pause the video to write all that stuff down, go ahead and pause. You don't have to watch it all the way through in one sitting. In this one, I've given us a chart here to get the information from. This happens a lot in our class. If we give you a chart, make sure you're looking in the directions to see what numbers to use. You don't get to choose. We're going to tell you. So in here, I told you we're going to use 1800 and 2000. So I'm just going to write these as an ordered pair again, just like I did on the last one. Some people don't need this step. If you don't need it, that's fine. Years are going to be our X value every single time. We're asked to find the average rate of change. We're going to round to two decimal places, and please put your units. I'm going to actually ask you to pause the video and give this a try, just like in class when I say you guys are going to try one. I want you to really try this. So go ahead and pause the video, try it, and then come back and we'll go over it, just like we do in class. All right, let's see how you did. I'm plugging in to my slope formula. Just to remind everybody, using those numbers for my slope formula, I typed in the numerator, I typed in the denominator, and then I rounded that to two decimal places. If you got 1.53, you are doing well. All right, let's talk about the units here. That 1.53 represents millions of people. That word millions is really important. 1.53 and 1.53 million is a lot different. So we're going to say this is million people per year. And there's those units right up there. I just took the Y unit over the X unit. So that's my unit. So go ahead and hit pause again and see if you can write that sentence out. You need to use those units, and you need to use either the word decreasing or increasing. Hit pause and really and truly try to write it out and pretend I was walking around to see if you were doing it. All right, let's see how this went. So I could say something like, actually, I'm going to start with on average again. I forgot that when I was starting the last one. So on average, the population of the U.S., this one's going to be increased because that was a positive slope by 1.53 million people per year between 2000 and 1800. You've got to have that word increased in there. You've got to have that million people per year in there to get the full credit. What this means is every year we didn't get exactly 1.53 people. Some years we had a bigger increase than others. You can see up here that one was a tiny increase. They're really close together. And then we've got a big increase right there. So on average just means we're spreading it out. We're saying, you know, what happened average, not specifically to a given year.